When I first met Phaedra Parks, she was absolutely amazing. It was kind of like opposites attract. Two totally different backgrounds. She had gone to school, came from a perfect family, perfect upbringing, went to grad school, graduated, became a lawyer. I myself was born into a dysfunctional family, suffered from sexual abuse at the age of 5, ended up running away the first time at the age of 9, and pretty much lived in and on the streets for most of my life until I ran into Phaedra. In 1999, my cousin and I were getting dressed and we decided that we wanted to go to the Bankhead Bounce, Atlanta's infamous Bankhead Bounce. And when we arrived there, finally got there that night, we had chilled in the club just about the whole night. And finally, when we were leaving, a young artist that had just hit the scene named Drama, I caught his attention. This is how I ended up meeting Phaedra, through my relationship with Drama. For some reason, Phaedra and we remained close. Drama eventually got sentenced to 12 years for armed robbery, and my relationship with Phaedra pursued, and we became very close. And after about a year or so, I guess she became a little more comfortable with our relationship, and that's when she introduced me to Apollo. When she introduced me to Apollo, it was strictly business, a business relationship that the two of them had. And at that time, they were remaking fraudulent insurance checks. And of course, I was the one that would go into the bank with the identification, deposit the check, and then go back to the bank and withdraw the money, whether it was $27,000, $30,000. This went on for about 2 years. And then I ended up catching a charge, getting locked up for forgery, and I ended up going to prison. On my first trip to prison, I only did 4 months. But while I was away at prison, Apollo had also got arrested. So when he got arrested and got banged up in Newton County, and I finally got out after doing my 4 months, Phaedra and I got back together again. This time, she introduced me to Everett, which is Apollo's brother. And we were all involved in a federal racketeering scheme against the federal government, stealing Porsches, Hummers, Cadillacs, Corvettes, any hot whip at that time, you name it, we had it. We would basically go to the car lot and write down the VIN numbers of the vehicles that we felt as if we wanted to keep or would make a good sale. Once we recorded the numbers down off of the VIN, we would take them back to Phaedra and Everett. And once they had it, they would make a fake identification card and a registration card to match the vehicle. The next day, you could take their ID and the registration card and go to another car dealership and tell them that this is your vehicle, and they'll cut you a key for a fee of $185. But once we had the key, we would then go back to the car dealerships after the dealership closed and drive off with whatever car that we picked earlier. After that, they would get sent off to the chop shop. Once everything was cleaned up, we'd take the title, swap the titles out for Georgia titles, and then take them to another car dealership, trade the car in for a car of lesser value, and walk away with the money. Everything had been going fine in our relationship for probably about 3 or 4 years until this last incident, and I was 7 months pregnant with my daughter. My cousin was going to the DMV to trade in one of the titles, and she got banged up at the DMV. So an auto theft detective by the name of Pete McFarland questioned her, but eventually released her. When she finally made it to me and told me everything that happened, I immediately called Phaedra and Everett, and my first concern was, where do we stand now with the project, and are we going to proceed? Phaedra told me that we should proceed with what we had. Everett said that we would leave in the morning as well. So we left that next morning heading to Tennessee with 3 of the luxury vehicles. And this is where I was arrested. This is where Everett was arrested. Because it was a federal case and I hadn't been in any federal trouble, I went back to state prison while Everett went back to federal custody along with Apollo. Once I was incarcerated, the plan and the agreement was always that she would always represent all of us if we ever got in any trouble. And that's what I expected. I expected her to represent me. I expected her to look out for me. I expected her to look out for my children if something was to happen. I expected her to do everything that she said she was going to do because I did everything that I said that I was going to do. I never told. I ended up getting 5 years in the state. So during the time where I'm doing my state time, like I said before, I was pregnant. I ended up giving birth to my daughter handcuffed to a bed. 6 months after that, my mother died of a massive heart attack. I couldn't go to her funeral because Brian Nichols at this time had shot up the Fulton County Courthouse and they wouldn't transport any prisoners. Phaedra went to my mother's funeral and stood on my behalf. And probably about 2 days later after my mother's funeral, I received a card in the mail from Phaedra telling me that everything would be okay when I got home. I got released from state custody in September of 2005. Upon my release, I tried to contact Phaedra several times, couldn't get in touch with her, but they told me when I was released I had 72 hours to report to the parole office. But when I got to the parole office, it just so happened that the feds were there waiting for me and arrested me as soon as I got to the parole office. So when we finally get down to the federal building, I realized that I'm being charged with 17 counts of conspiracy, auto theft, racketeering, everything to say the least. So eventually I got released from the feds and put on pretrial release, and I'm trying to contact Phaedra. She's not answering the telephone. My family is trying to find her. I'm going by her office. She's hiding from me. Okay, so finally, eventually I do get in touch with Phaedra. Don't worry about it. This is Phaedra. I got you. I'm going to take care of you. Just remember what we talked about. Let them know that I'll be representing you. The day of my arraignment finally comes. She doesn't show up. When the Judge Linda Evans, puts in a call for Phaedra, she tells the judge that she won't be representing me due to a conflict of interest. Maybe she got scared. Maybe she thought I would tell. Maybe, you know, she felt that it was just getting too hot. I couldn't understand why she had just totally and completely abandoned me. So in my mind, I was cool with it. I was like, you know what? Nobody ever put a gun in my head. Nobody made me do anything. I'm a grown woman. I accept all of my consequences for what I did. So Everett Trapati stands up in front of our federal judge, Linda Evans, him and his lawyer, and they tell the judge, they say, well, you know what? She was the mastermind, and we were working for her. So the judge, she knew that I couldn't be the mastermind because I hadn't had any charges similar to the charges that we were being charged with. But Everett and his brother, Apollo, were both on federal parole for the same thing when they got arrested again. So she sentenced Everett to 5 years, and I got sentenced to 3 years supervised release, which meant that I didn't have to go back to the feds, but I could actually be at home with my children, but I had to be up under constant supervision. I'm struggling. Like I said before, my mother died. My grandmother died when I was in prison. I had my baby handcuffed to a bed. My baby's father, he got life. So, of course, there is no child support. Nobody will give me a job. Not only am I a convicted felon, I'm a single mother. I couldn't get any housing assistance because I was a convicted felon. I couldn't get any Section 8 because I was a convicted felon. I even went to the nightclub to try to dance to support my children. I got hired at the nightclub, but when I went to go get my permit, they told me that I couldn't get a permit because I was a convicted felon. But I never gave up. I kept pressing. And when I saw the first episode of Housewives of Atlanta, I was shocked when I saw that she married Apollo. Not only was I shocked when I found out that she married Apollo, I was extra shocked when I saw Everett featured on the show several times. When I found out that Everett worked as a paralegal in her law firm while he was still in the halfway house. It hurt me when I looked and I saw the episode when the young lady from Destiny's Child came strolling in her office and was crying and said, you know, I've been to jail and I just want to get my life together. And Phaedra actually had the audacity to cry and then touch her and tell her that she had the golden touch and she was going to help her get her life together. It hurt me when I watched the show and I saw Phaedra giving birth to her baby on the show, and I knew that I was handcuffed to a bed when I had my baby, and they took my baby from me 24 hours later. It hurt me when I thought about Phaedra, who was somebody that was my friend. When I learned that she went and she stood over my mother's body, and she knew that they were framing me. She knew she had no intention to help me get out of the situation that she created. Somebody had to be the fall guy for the entire operation, and it just happened to be me. So my book is not about vengeance, it's about justice. It's about telling my story. It's about telling the story of a 5-year-old girl that was sexually abused, who lived in and out on the streets, who ran into somebody that pretended to be a friend, that pretended to be a mentor. You know, I just couldn't understand why she would be so involved with destroying my life but not interested at all in helping me build it up. And just to kind of sum it up, it's kind of like a football game, if you say. The coach, he stands on the sidelines and he calls all the plays. But the player is the one that actually takes the ball and runs down the field, and he's the one that takes all the hits. Not only does he take all the hits, he brings home the trophy. You can't leave a player injured, land in the middle of the field. The least you can do is send the paramedics in, wrap them up, help him with his wounds, and send him on his way. If he out the game and he can't play no more, then that's how you handle that. But you don't just leave him injured in the middle of the field.